Greetings all, and welcome to Daily Pali Reading. If you haven't noticed, it is Christmas Day when I'm recording this, and I thought what better way to celebrate Christmas than to wear a Santa cap and to study some of the Buddha's teachings from the Pali Canon. And this teaching, this is a beautiful, powerful teaching, comes from the Khuddaka Nikaya, from the Udana. This is from the second Vagga, or chapter, and from the second Sutta. Yañca kāmasukhaṃ loke, yañcidaṃ diviyaṃ sukhaṃ. Taṇhakkhayasukhassa ete, kalaṃ nāgghanti soḷasi. Now, by the way, this, because I had to I did this video once before, and it did not go very well. There were some technical problems. I had pulled this apart, so this is what it looks like if you were to check the Pali text. So we'll do a little translation here. Whatever sense pleasure there is in the world, whatever such divine pleasure there is or exists, these do not have the value of a 16th, you can see I already wrote it there once, a 16th of the pleasure of the destruction of craving. And that's pretty literal. Let's go through this. I should say, take a minute and think about what's being said here. It's really quite beautiful. And it ties in, I believe, pretty well with Sat Chit. Let's see. Ananda. I want to write it down here so I don't forget it. Sat Chit Ananda, or maybe all run together. Sat Chit Ananda. That would be the Sanskrit. Probably familiar with that, but we'll come back to it in just a minute here. So Yañca, this is what? And this cha is actually making it indefinite. This is one way to mark indefiniteness. Whatever sukhaṃ, whatever happiness or pleasure, and this is the opposite of dukkha. Whatever happiness, pleasure, and not only happiness or pleasure, but sense pleasure, kama, like the Kama Sutra. Whatever sense pleasure there is in the world, and now here this is probably more common way to mark indefiniteness, and whatever, and we might say such, whatever such divine pleasure there is. And we can see this word is pretty much related to our word divine, to deus in Latin, deva, and a little more, according to the Pali English Dictionary, and this has come up in another Pali English or Pali daily reading. Type. This is, according to the Pali English Dictionary, this is the prose form. This is more of the poetic form. And these V's and B's, especially I think VY and B's, someone can let me know if that's correct, they interchange from time to time in Pali. We don't need to know a whole lot about that right now. So that takes care of this line. Sukhaṃ comes up twice. There's sense pleasure here, and this means like our world, and then the otherworldly pleasure, the pleasure that devas and gods might experience, which we can imagine would be greater than the pleasure people find here. These, we get this here kind of run together with this long compound. This is not really part of the compound. It's just been elided, maybe for metrical purposes or just the way it was said. This is what we have. These, and this is the subject here, nominative, nāgghanti. And this is actually or just nāgghanti. These do not have the value of, or they are not worth. And when these come together, they do produce this long these do not have the value, or they are not worth a 16th. I think this is kalaṃ. This really just means a very small fraction. Could be taken to be a 16th. A 16th-sixteenth, it's a very small. We're just, I think, meant to understand an infinitesimal. They do not have the value of an infinitesimal amount of the pleasure, sukhassa. So this is our genitive. And then here we've got really this. And if we want to be a little more we don't get Taṇhakkhaya, but Taṇhakkhaya. So we just get another ka sound here. They do not have the value of the pleasure. And because of the compound, we have to, there's some work is put upon us to figure out what the relationship is between these words. And this is really a tapurisa and a tapurisa, I think. So the destruction of, or I should say the happiness of the destruction of tanha. So if we were to kind of break these apart, we would expect maybe something like, so this is a feminine tanha, so its genitive would be Taṇhakkhayasukhassa, of the pleasure of the destruction of craving, of tanha, of thirst, of addiction, of like a fever. If we've ever, and we've probably all experienced different levels of craving. I mean, some craving is extremely intense. So should just take a minute here and think about what this is saying. That any pleasure that we could imagine, that we could experience, or any divine being could experience, doesn't compare to the happiness or the pleasure that comes from the destruction of craving. And it might be an open question. I think the Pali English dictionary says that this Taṇhakkhaya is almost nirvana, maybe not quite. Let's say it isn't equivalent of nirvana. Let's say it is not the same thing as eradicating lobha, dosa, and moha. You know, that it's not the same as eradicating lust, hatred, and delusion, but that it's close. So if that's the case, we can imagine that the joy or the happiness we find that comes from that, from uprooting the three unwholesome roots, is even more immense. And the reason I think that this is beautiful, it ties in with this Vedantic teaching of what is Brahma or Brahman. You know, one of the classical definitions is being, or what's real, chit, consciousness, and ananda, which is bliss. And it seems that the Buddha is also telling us that what we can expect upon overcoming our egocentricity and identification with this mind-body complex, that when we break through, eradicate these unwholesome roots, when we give up craving, that we can expect ananda. And in a future video, we will talk about how the Buddha probably completely agrees that the experience of nirvana is Satchit Ananda. Peace, everyone.